There's a great cartoon from Far Side where there are 3 people dying of thirst in the desert, a huge desert. And there's nothing around for 100 miles. And they're parched, and they're all wearing rags, and the sun is beating down. And right in front of them, there's a water fountain, like the kind you'd find in a school or a building or something. And the guy in front is holding the button down, but he's not drinking. And he turns to the 2 people behind him and he says, "Now hold your horses, everyone. Let's let it run for a minute and see if it gets any colder." So, obviously what's funny about that is that they're standing at the fountain and dying of thirst, but they're not drinking the water. And there's a French poem with a similar idea. "I die of thirst at the mouth of the fountain." And that's how we are too sometimes, because the fountain of God's love, the love of the Father, is available to us, but we forget about him. We're often tempted to just keep our thirst rather than drink from the fountain. Today in the gospel we get a sign of that love, because the only reason Jesus is getting baptized is to bring us to the Father. Jesus goes to the Jordan where John the Baptist is already baptizing people. Now, John is doing this as a kind of symbolic act of repentance for the people who are coming. They're renouncing their sins and they're turning back to God, so they're turning over a new leaf. And they're washing in the Jordan as a sign of that repentance. So, why is Jesus going to be baptized? Jesus is taking the place of a sinner. He's acting as if he's someone in need of repentance. That's why John says, "No, Lord, you should be baptizing me." But Jesus is going into the waters of baptism to sanctify them so that anyone who goes into those waters of baptism later can share his divinity. He goes into the water as a sinner, not because he is one, but because we are. That way, he can lead us out of sin and into the Father's love. When we're preparing the gifts before the consecration of the Eucharist at Mass, the altar servers bring water and wine to the priest, or if there is one, a deacon. And the priest or deacon pours wine into the chalice first, and then a little bit of water. And as he does that, he says in a low voice, "By the mystery of this water and wine, may we come to share in the divinity of Christ, who humbled himself to share in our humanity." By the mystery of this water and wine, may we come to share in the divinity of Christ, who humbled himself to share in our humanity. The wine represents the divinity of Christ, and the water represents our humanity. When you put a drop of wine into a glass of water, it diffuses and you can see the color. But when you put a drop of water into a glass of wine, the water disappears. It's consumed into the wine, just like our humanity is consumed into the divinity of Christ by our baptism. If we want proof of the Father's love for us, it's that he sent his Son, Jesus, in the place of a sinner to lead us out of sin through the waters of baptism. And that action of humility that begins at Jesus' baptism is fully completed when he dies on the cross. Jesus is crucified as a sinner, as if he were a criminal, so that he can lead us into his divinity and make us worthy of the love of the Father. In exchange for our sinfulness, he makes us beloved sons and daughters of the Father. That's the fountain of God's infinite love. Now, all of us sometimes find ourselves looking in different ways for God's love. We do things anxiously, trying to achieve something or prove something that will hopefully deserve his love. Maybe it's performing well at work, or being the smartest or the most attractive, and we anxiously seek those things because in our hearts we believe that that's what it takes for the Father to love us. But that's like dying of thirst when the fountain is right there. Look at Jesus' baptism and death on the cross. God's love for us will never go away, and it will never diminish. He doesn't want us to sin because it wounds our souls and the souls of others, but his love does not change. So here's a practice that I've found helpful from time to time. You just take 30 seconds or a minute any time of day. You just stop what you're doing and you just recognize the loving gaze of the Father. And that can put us back in a peace of mind and remind us to rely on him and not ourselves. God's love is an eternal fountain, and it's poured out for us. We only have to drink.